A Pakistani asylum seeker has won £100,000 for, quote, being treated like a criminal, despite being here illegally. Nadra Almas came to Britain in 2004 on a student visa. She then overstayed her visa. She was handcuffed and imprisoned at a detention centre and told that she'd be deported. She launched a series of appeals claiming, you guessed it, that her Christian faith meant that she was at risk of persecution in Pakistan. Well, after about 3 years, she was eventually granted refugee status, obviously, because we'll basically let anyone stay in Britain. But during that time, she was not allowed to travel, work or claim any benefits. So now she's won compensation totalling just over £98,500, claiming the conditions she faced breached her human rights. I mean, this just sums it up, doesn't it? Someone comes on a student visa, deliberately overstays, makes an asylum claim, has that claim rejected, makes a load more claims, and eventually we give them asylum. And then we're on the hook for tens of thousands of pounds in compensation. Compare that to what's going on in America right now.
Illegally broke our nation's laws, and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
But just listen to what the judge said in this Pakistani lady's case. That the Home Office did not have a good reason to believe she would abscond at the time, and that they showed a reckless disregard for her human rights. What about our rights? What about the rights of hard-working, law-abiding British citizens who are forced to put up with people overstaying visas or coming here illegally, and who are now on the hook for record levels of compensation? In the last 5 years, a total of £53.2 million has been paid in compensation for 2,222 people who brought successful cases against the Home Office for illegal detention. In 2017, a Somali career criminal, Abdul Rahman Mohammed, then aged 39, was awarded nearly 80 grand after the Home Office admitted his illegal detention. He'd been granted asylum status in the UK, but after committing a string of crimes, he was held at a detention centre for 445 days in 3 separate periods as officials tried desperately to deport him. But after using human rights legislation to successfully fight his deportation, he then won a massive payout on the basis that he was locked up for too long while the process dragged on. It's insane, isn't it? But I think this problem goes deeper. I think we have to start looking at the lawyers and the judges. And let's start at the very top, shall we? What kind of cases did our Prime Minister Keir Starmer take on? Well, in 2003, he represented some asylum seekers and won. Now, the court's decision in that specific case mandated that the government provide accommodation and financial aid to asylum seekers at risk of poverty, regardless of how long after they arrived in the UK that they actually claimed to be asylum seekers. Well, our now Attorney General, Lord Hermer, took on a case by an Eritrean man who claimed to be a child migrant. British immigration staff thought he looked to be in his mid-20s, and Italian authorities later reported that the man had told them he was 26. Hermer argued that age verification checks can be wrong. He ultimately lost the case. Now, they will say that they were just doing their job, and fair enough, you know, there's the cab rank rule, isn't there? But I'm not sure that always stacks up. Ask yourselves this. What kind of person goes into that line of work? Now, the legal profession is stacked full of these people who are ready and waiting to help anyone not just stay in Britain, but also claim as much compensation as possible. Remember the Labour councillor who advertised her legal services last year?
Do not fear. Iram Ali is here to help you regularise your visa in the UK and submit an application to the Home Office based on your human rights.
Apparently, she's still a Labour councillor. The fact is, these migrants who try it on wouldn't be able to if there wasn't a standing army of lawyers and barristers who were happy to take their cases on. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. We've got former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser, Tory peer Lord Sean Bailey, and former Conservative MP Anna Firth. Anna, I'll start with you on this. Do you think that certain high-ranking people in our legal profession have to start having some serious questions asked of them in these cases?
No, I don't actually, because I think that we have a system where lawyers interpret the law and judges make their judgments. What I think has gone wrong here is the laws of the land, and it went wrong in 1998 when Tony Blair passed the Human Rights Act. I was in Chambers at the time, and that act was an absolute game changer. But prior to that act, we have a dualist system of law in this country. Prior to that act, we could ignore rulings from the ECHR because it was a treaty. We didn't have to follow them. After Tony Blair passed the Human Rights Act, any person who was bringing a case in any court could raise the issue of their human rights directly. We need to repeal that act. It's done countless harm, and it's the principal thing behind all of those cases that you've just read out to us.
I mean, sure, what's your view on this? Because, for me, the law is an ass, but also some of the people who are desperate to enforce it. I mean, we almost have these kind of, ambulance chasers, don't we, hanging around outside asylum detention centres saying, did someone put any handcuffs on you? You can be in line for compensation.
I think there's three things to be said. It would be easy to blame judges and say that they are the reason. They're part of the reason. But I think as much of it lays in Parliament with politicians as it does with judges. We need a law that's much clearer. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think our whole system, our entire society needs to take into account that systems can be played. If you're a judge and you take everything on face value, then it's fine. But no, we have lawyers who deliberately ambulance chase, look for cases that he can win. It's emboldened people to play our system. And there's also a disconnect as well, because there's things that work in one part of the system, so how we detain people, but then they go against ECHR rules, which is ridiculous. If we're going to hold to those rules, then the system itself, the day-to-day system, has to act in the way that those rules dictate. That needs changing as well.
If you just Google immigration lawyer struck off now, the internet is full of cases where immigration lawyers have committed immigration offences, whether that's through providing dodgy documents for people, for money, obviously. I mean, I would say that's a place that we could start. Are they all above board? Is that not worth looking at? Does it not imply that maybe some of these lawyers are actually in on the old immigration scam?
Well, I think certainly, yeah. I mean, that's worth looking at. I think what we do need, though, is if they're vultures feeding off a decaying carcass, we need to make sure that we're not giving them a decaying carcass from which they can feed. Which is why we need a system that works, a system that actually processes applications and doesn't have, as in this case. I mean, she got compensation, it seems, because she was eventually granted asylum, and in the meantime, she hadn't been able to work, etc. And what we need is a system that doesn't take years and years and years to reach decisions. Because, of course, the problem with that, whilst people are waiting for the decisions, to be fair to her, she couldn't work. We were paying for her.
It's the judge who decided that in that case. I mean,
the compensation's crackers. The compensation is crackers.
This girl came to this country in 2004 as a student on a 5-month visa. She should have been gone 24 years ago. It shouldn't even have got to that point in 2015 where she was applying for refugee status. It went wrong right at the beginning because they didn't get rid of her.
It goes back to the point I'm trying to make. If the rules say clearly what can happen, then you don't have this nonsense. So rules say if you overstay your visa, you cannot appeal. Or it says if you want to appeal, you need to leave the country, because what people will do, their case is significantly stronger if they get here because of the ECRH rules that they're entitled to a family life because they've been here so long. Then they have dependents, or the whole time we are paying and we can't do them.
And that's when you get into Tony Blair's.
Well, what needs to happen? The rules need to say, right, until you are legal here, you are not legal. So whatever you do, build a family life or not, it is immaterial.
I just do not understand how a judge can look at that case and decide that's £100,000. For me, that implies political bias in the judiciary.
Well, I think it's not political bias in terms of party political bias. It's a kind of left mindset, as it were, a kind of slightly skewed mindset. Because I'm somebody on the left of politics, but I don't think that's a sensible decision to do that. And I know what you mean about the human rights. I mean, I can argue that I think we should have the Human Rights Act, but of course what we saw when the Tories were in government is they didn't do anything to get rid of it in 14 years, and they had a big row about whether or not they should do it. And at the moment, if you remember in the Tory leadership election, Robert Jenrick was in favour of coming out, of making it Tory policy. Kemi was umming and ahhing, and she still hasn't said what she thinks.
We want to get, I mean, I know, Matthew, you love to bring in the party politics, and
I think you mentioned Tony Blair did that.
If we want to get party political in recent years, your party voted against the illegal migration.
Anna, can you ask the question, what does your party think? Are you in favour of the Anna? Are you in favour of the Human Rights Act or not?
Your party voted against
Anna?
our measures
I will tell you.
Sean's going to tell us.
To get rid of illegal migrants.
Anna won't answer the question, but Sean's going to.
What I think we might both agree on, actually, is 100,000...
Yeah, that's daft. Absolutely. The system's not working. Of course. But it's all very well to criticise the Human Rights Act. The Tories need to stop sitting on the fence and decide whether they're in or out. It's not the hokey-cokey.
So the difficulty with the Human Rights Act, the word human rights is powerful. Everybody wants to deliver them. You could argue that it's Britain who invented the concept. The problem with the Human Rights Act is being gamed. That's the problem. Kemi's position is, let's develop a proper policy to go back. The reason some people can't say we're in or we're out because they don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Is it unfair of me, Matthew, to allude to just a couple of cases there that involve Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer, now our Attorney-General, and to just gently float the idea that maybe they have actually historically been quite pro the idea of people being able to stay in this country, people being able to still claim benefits even if they hadn't immediately claimed for asylum?
Yeah.
You know, is that unfair?
I think that's a bit unfair, Patrick, because I think what we saw is that the Labour government did continue with this case. Remember, it's the government that has been found. The government was trying to not pay compensation. It's the courts that have forced the government to pay compensation. I do, but I believe that we need to have a proper asylum system that allows people, some of the most vulnerable people across the world, to have asylum here. But clearly, at the moment, the system ain't working.
Well, the system might not work, but nobody couldn't tell us it isn't a very, very generous system. It gives and gives and gives some more. So,
not always to the right people.
Well, the other thing I want to say, someone could sensibly be in the opinion that the legal system is left-leaning because there's been many cases where you could say they've over-interpreted ECHR in the direction of allowing people to stay in the country. That is true as well. And I think the judiciary, the only way to give them the space to move back is to be much clearer about the rules.
Well, the judge in the Pakistani lady's case said that she couldn't... Sorry, she gave the £100,000 because the lady in question wasn't able to apply for benefits. I don't know whether that makes me more angry, to be honest with you. But and I just want to question the mindset of people who go and specialise in human rights law, OK? I'm sorry, they're not the kind of people, in my view, who want to make it more difficult to get into Britain.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And look at...
We've not now got one of those who's running the country and one is the Attorney General.
We had Tony Blair in Number 10 married to a human rights lawyer, and now we've got a human rights lawyer running the country, and now we've got Lord Hermer, and we've all I'm sure you've discussed endlessly the absolute tragedy of the Chagos Islands, and Lord Hermer's up to that completely behind that debate. But I mean, the interesting thing here is that the backlog of asylum claims has actually gone up in the last 3 months.
That's not good enough either.
Under this government. So what is your government actually going to do? Because Kemi has come out with a very clear policy now.
Which wouldn't do... Today's announcement, Anna, wouldn't do a single thing to get rid of the asylum seekers.
No, what she said... No.
I know exactly what she said.
This lady here that we're discussing, who ran out of her visa, she wouldn't exist now.
Yeah.
Kemi's...
absolutely, that's not true. The Kemi's changes today wouldn't change it, Sean. It's not.
Let me just take you back to the compensation piece. What's bizarre about the compensation in this particular case, she's been compensated when our rules say she isn't allowed to have those benefits, but she's been compensated because she didn't get those benefits. That is the disconnect. That is ridiculous. If the rules say you can't have the benefits, you shouldn't be able to even take us to court to get that money because it shouldn't really exist.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds sensible, but there's no way that any Tory can try and claim that their 14 years in charge of the asylum system weren't a complete and total shambles. Labour hasn't sorted it out yet. It needs to, and it's going to be tested on whether it does. But it was handed one hell of an inheritance, and Kemi, of course, sat in that government, voted all the way along. But they're trying to pretend they weren't in power 6 months ago. They're trying to pretend they didn't make the country in such a mess.
Hold on. Let me just say. Let's be clear. Matthew's correct. The Tories cannot say that we were good immigration. But let's be clear. Kemi didn't try to say.
No, to be fair to her, she didn't.
She hadn't said that. She said,
no, to be fair,
we were weak and we're going to do something about it.
When we came into power in 2011 or 10 or whenever it was, the number of asylum claims, my understanding, is more than 500,000 backlog.
Not true. Simply not true.
Let's be clear.
Not true, Anna.
Human rights.
Just not true.
The human rights laws changed by Tony Blair.
Total nonsense.
Was the beginning of the rot.
All right. OK, fine. Well, look, we haven't got time to get stuck into the variety of different things here now, but we're giving it quite a good go, I think. But there we go. Look, I just think it's reasonable to float the question about the mindset of some of the people who maybe operate in the legal profession and whether or not they are actually in it for the right reasons. But, hey, that's just my view.